We're back. We're back. We're back. We're out of hibernation. It's the Puckleheads, Marcus White, Conall McNeilis, talking playoffs today. It's that time of year. Play the Pitbull playoff song, even though it's about basketball, to get you excited.
I don't even know that one.
Oh, it's great. It's fantastic.
Is it better than One Shining Moment?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it's literally just Timber, but him saying playoffs. I'll link it to you after the show.
Okay.
Marcus White, as always, joined by Conall McNeilis. It's been a while since we did this, but it's playoff time. So over the next 2 days, we're going to go team by team, conference by conference, and tell you what each of these teams needs to have happen in order to win the Stanley Cup. That doesn't mean we think that all of these teams actually have a chance. This is just a good, funny way of previewing the playoffs. Conall, how you doing?
Doing all right, Marcus. Doing all right. Playoffs around the corner. I feel it is bittersweet. First time since 2010 I don't get to see the Rangers in the playoffs.
Right.
But Elaine Vino got fired, everybody. So you could, just rewatch and listen to all our tapes about how I've been talking about this for years and years and years. And
probably since we've been doing it, because
pretty much since we've been
calling for his head since before we started doing the show.
Yeah. I was calling for his head like 2 months into his regime. So I mean, like, I just did not like the guy. And then this is the guy who won a President's Trophy and took the Rangers to a Stanley Cup. So I mean, listen, he had some runs there, but we can get in that debate another day here. I want to focus on the playoffs. That'll be part of our offseason draft preview and all that fun stuff here. Before we get into everything, Marcus, I think we have to touch about something that's really kind of shook the hockey world, and I think really the news world in total. The Humboldt Broncos, of course, the horrific bus accident that happened over the weekend or late last week. It took the lives of now 15 members of that bus, and there's several more in the hospital. There was 28 total on the bus. So 13 more in the hospital, some in critical and different conditions. We don't know all the details. I mean, Marcus, we kind of talked about it, and I know we kind of all reached out to a lot of our hockey friends, but the hockey community, I think, is still a very tight community, and sometimes that drives us insane with how small boy club it is. But at the same time, it's a big family. And we were just talking about it before the show, how I think everybody who's ever played hockey at any level can relate to this, because we've all had a travel tournament and had to drive 5 hours to somewhere, whether it be in a car with our friends and family, on a team bus. We could relate to it driving on a bus all the way to Cedar Rapids, Iowa for roller hockey our senior year and all that stuff. And we've driven back in snowstorms and all this crazy stuff. So to say this is a horrific tragedy is somehow an understatement, Marcus, when you think about all these young kids. But the GoFundMe page has I know they're over $1 million now, which is crazy to go support these families, and some great tributes around the world. So what are your thoughts on it here, Marcus?
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely. It's just incredibly tragic, and it can't help but remind you of your own experiences. And, I didn't have the same high school and youth hockey experiences that you did necessarily in terms of, driving in bad weather. But definitely once I got to Syracuse, I did. And there were times where, it's almost even worse when you're the ones that are driving the bus, so to speak. Not to say that anything we encountered or experienced is worse.
No, I know what you're trying to say.
The fear of a parent, I think, is there regardless anytime a player goes on one of these trips. But I think especially if it's in their own hands, and it's kind of, if this had happened, I think I'd like to think, if this had happened when we were in school, it would have made us really rethink how we were going to tournaments. And I hope it makes youth hockey leagues all the way up to junior and minor league hockey leagues really kind of rethink the travel and rethink, the necessity of the travel, as well as, and I understand that costs are a factor, but that's almost one area where, the hockey world shouldn't necessarily be cutting costs, so to speak, and, trying to drive as opposed to fly. And, I know you can't always fly from place to place in Saskatchewan, but I hope it necessitates change, because one commonality I've seen in so many of these reactions, beyond the heartbreak and beyond the people tying themselves together and being so supportive, is just the commonality of, wow, that could have been me. If it was a different time, a different place, that could have been me. So I hope it shouldn't have taken this to prompt some kind of change, but I hope it does.
Yeah, hopefully, when you think about all these, even the minor leagues, Marcus, you just mentioned it, these guys play 3 games in 3 nights, and they're traveling through upstate New York and Canada, and they're driving on Greyhound buses, basically charter buses, and it's unfortunately it's tragic, but it unfortunately a lot of times takes something like this, as we know, to make a change. And hopefully we could figure out some safety stuff, whether there's restrictions on when you can and not travel, so that helps with the time slots. I think that's probably the biggest thing you could talk about here. But our thoughts are
spreading out the schedule, so there isn't the 3 games and 3 nights that you're talking about, especially in the dead of winter.
Yeah,
Not that this is the dead of winter; it's April, but
hey, it's still cold in a lot of parts of northern United States and Canada, especially up in Saskatchewan there. So our thoughts are with Humboldt. We'll tweet, actually, Marcus, I'll make sure we'll tweet out the GoFundMe page.
Cool.
Just $10, I mean, could go a long way. They have donated so many, and a lot of, we've seen the NHL, colleges, everyone is reaching out. So a great reaction so far to something I wish we didn't have to talk about, but certainly had to touch on it here. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of tributes during the playoffs as well. So should be going there. So we segue into that, Marcus. NHL playoffs. Even if your team's not in it, Marcus, it's a blast to watch.
Best time of year.
In a way, sometimes it's less stressful. It's even more fun when your
team's
more
freeing.
More freeing is probably the better word. I like that stress when your team's in it a bit, but it's more freeing. I can just hop around, open a cold one, check out a bunch of games here. And today we're going to do 2 parts. We're going to do the Eastern Conference first here, so my neck of the woods compared to Marcus's. And we're going to just basically rank the teams from 8 to 1, starting reverse order, why they can win the cup, basically. And once again, as Marcus just said, that doesn't mean they're going to win the cup. Do not go.
No.
Don't be calling Vegas right now, telling them to put $1,000 on Team X here. So we got her going here. Marcus, I think we're in agreement in the 8th team here, and they did finish 8th in the overall brackets, even though we could rip the NHL playoff format another day of the week, is the New Jersey Devils, Marcus. Marcus, I get to see a lot more of the Devils than you do, but what do you think the Devils have to do in order to win the Stanley Cup? What would have to happen for the New Jersey Devils to be Stanley Cup champions?
I think they would need to, hire a bearded, force user to find a cloning facility on Camino and have him, foster the creation of a clone army. I think that's probably would be the biggest help. So they could clone Taylor Hall. And potentially clone Nico Hischier. I actually think where they're going to be most hurt is on defense. I think they have a forward group that, the 2nd through 4th lines. You look at that, you're like, oh man, that's a second line. But I think there's opportunities for mismatches there. As strange as it sounds, I think they have good speed and they have a good amount of depth. The problem is that they're just so reliant on one player and his carriage of the team and Taylor Hall, and he's been as good as advertised. It makes you wonder if a team like Edmonton could use a scoring winger like that. But jokes aside, I think I think what has to happen for them is Taylor Hall has to continue to play out of his mind, and they have to finally get good goaltending, whether that's from Keith Kincaid or Corey Schneider. Schneider's is doing that thing again where he oscillates from really, really good one year to really, really bad the next year. And Keith Kincaid, as much as he's taken the net and the reins from Schneider, hasn't been great.
He's posted like a .913 save percentage or something. It hasn't been,
which is like right at league average. It's okay, but
yeah, he has not been that good.
So I think they've got the worst cup chance of any team. I think they're happy to be here. They won the lottery last year. I think they won, or did Philadelphia?
Yeah, they won it. They freaking won it.
They won the lottery last year. I think Hischier has been really, really good this year. You look at some of his underlying numbers, and that guy's going to be a star very quickly. As much as it pains you to hear that, Conall, because they're 1 year and the Devils are seemingly back. But yeah, this is going to be a quick trip through the postseason. This is going to be a quick jaunt. A lot would have to happen for them to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, basically Taylor Hall is going to have to score average 2.5 points a game, and Keith Kincaid or Corey Schneider would have to post a .945 even strength save percentage and like a 1.6 goals against average.
Right.
And they're playing maybe the most lethal offensive team in the league in the first round. So
yeah.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Good night and good luck, Devils.
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah, good luck, Chuck. There, eh? Moving on up in the world here to the next team. Who you got, Marcus?
I think it's the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah,
and
I would probably agree.
Less so because of who they are, but more so because of who they're playing. I just don't love the Pittsburgh matchup for them. After a slow start, and we'll get to the Penguins later. The Penguins are looking like a juggernaut. But good for the Flyers to get back after starting the year in pretty poor fashion. I think they went
had a 10-game losing streak
right,
in November,
right,
and then in the playoffs. So
yeah. I think I've talked to some Flyers fans. Their opinions on Dave Hackstall seem to oscillate from week to week, whether or not he's a good coach. I think goaltending. Yes, Brian Elliott's been banged up, and when he was in that Ken Hitchcock system, he was great. Hasn't been stellar in Philadelphia this year, although he's been better at even strength than on the penalty kill. Peter Mrazek, on the other hand, has not been very good. Don't blame the Flyers for taking that chance to stabilize their team.
No, that was a good move for the Flyers. I don't think. Yeah, I think that was a calculated. There was almost no risk involved, but they gave up like a 4th round pick for the guy.
Right, and no matter how bad he's been, you still only gave up that. So I think a lot's going to have to happen for them. But I think they're in a better position to pull it off than the Devils are, but not necessarily in as good a position as our next team we'll discuss. Because I think their forward group is lethal. Couturier has been excellent. Arguably should be the Selke Trophy frontrunner this year.
Couturier, Voracek, and Giroux, have just been a lightning rod of a line there. Moving Giroux, for the most part, he played wing this season, Marcus, which kind of opened up his offensive abilities. The guy gets 102 points here in the season. Voracek's been great. We love Ghost on the back end. Travis Konecny, who probably won't win the Calder Trophy, but he's got a bright future as a 20-year-old. Good scoring up front and some nice defense in there, Marcus, but it seems like we could go back for the last 20 years and say goaltending is probably going to be the issue in Philadelphia. Right. And goaltending, once again, is probably going to be the issue in this series. Their blue line depth after their top 3-ish really kind of falls off.
They're playing Andrew McDonald.
Exactly. After Provorov and after Ghost, it takes a deep incline. Andrew McDonald, Brendan Manning, Gudas is just a liability. I can't stand that guy. So that's going to be an issue when you're playing a team that has 4 forward lines, basically 4 skill lines in the Flyers. They're gonna find a mismatch eventually.
Even if Brassard isn't healthy for this to start this series, there's still going to be mismatches for the Penguins. But they're potent enough offensively and we'll get to the Penguins. Matt Murray's not been great this year, and the goaltending's been bad enough where you can absolutely envision a repeat of that nuts.
Oh, I hope so. Give me a
Penguins series.
9-7 game. I would love it.
Yeah,
I would love it. I want 40 fights. I want 9-7. I just give it to me.
9-7 average scoring output.
Yeah, that's right.
Moving on now to who we think has the 6th best chances in the Eastern Conference. Our old friend John Tortorella, coaching the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think we might be undervaluing their chances a little bit here, and it's less so because of what they've done, and almost more so because of what their opponent hasn't done this year.
Yeah, probably.
I think this Caps team is vulnerable, man. This is the worst Caps team that's been in this position that I can remember.
Yeah, of course. And there's a part of me that kind of wants to pick Columbus in the first round. I'm still on the fence. I'm going back and forth between Washington and Columbus there. But regardless, Columbus, and we talked about the evolution of John Tortorella. Columbus, Corsi for percentage in the year on the year, 8th in the league, Marcus. Right. Not bad. Corsi for per 60. They're also right up there, so they drop off a little bit there. But still, when you think about Columbus and you think about John Tortorella, great, arguably one of the best top 5 goalies in the league in Bobrovsky. When he's on his game, he's electric. Their first pair defensive crew and Zach Werenski and Seth Jones has the chance to be the best D pairing for the next 12 years in the NHL.
Absolutely.
And obviously they have some good scoring up front. Artemi Panarin, been electric for them.
Who might have been the driving force on that Kane line after all, but that's none of my business.
That's none of my business. What up, Stan Bowman? Who was like, did you hear his quotes on that trade, by the way?
What did he say?
He was like, well, I don't think it's fair to judge that trade after 1 year. I think you're going to have to give it a year or two to give both players a fair
trade. All right, man. And I'm the biggest Brandon Saad stan there is outside of Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. But come on, man.
Like, Brandon Saad, like, still a really nice player, but, like, as far as offensive upside, it's not even a comparison.
Yeah.
So, Marcus, our question here, we'll go back to our question here on Columbus. What does Columbus have to do to win the Stanley Cup?
See, I don't know if they're necessarily going to have to – they're going to need – of these, like, bottom three, and I think it's a clear bottom three, I think they need the least breaks to go their way.
I agree.
think you can legitimately make the argument that they're a better team than the Washington Capitals. The gaps between teams in terms of puck possession have closed over the years. There's more teams within 2% of that 50% mark than there have ever been. But they're still a positive possession team, and the Caps aren't like this is not a great Capitals team. So I think go ahead.
Add in there that Philip Grubauer is starting game 1 for Washington.
Right, and we'll talk about the Grubauer-Holtby debate because it's surprisingly, in my opinion, a smart move by Barry Trotz, but we can get into that a little later. What I think has to happen is Bobrovsky's going to have to, quote unquote, raise his game in the playoffs. He hasn't been as good in the postseason as he's been in the regular season. Again, how much meaning we can actually put in that in such a small sample, I think is up for debate. We know that the playoffs are more meaningful, but when you're dealing with a sample of 6 games a year as opposed to 60, when Bobrovsky's the best goalie in the league, chances are he's going to be that. And when he's on his game, I think he is the best goalie in the league.
Yeah, so do I.
I think I was looking at goals saved above average on Corsica as well as the goalie WAR stat, and very quietly, Sergei Bobrovsky is right up there. It's kind of like an ideal Tortorella Rangers team in that it's if those Rangers team had puck possession on their side. This is a top 10 puck possession team with one of the best defensive pairings in the league and maybe the most talented player in the Eastern Conference outside of Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin / Evgeny Malkin, Kucherov, like in it just below that class. Is that fair to say?
Second tier of scoring, yeah.
I think he certainly leads that second tier of superstar.
He's right up there.
So I don't know if they're going to need a ton to break their way. I think they just need to. It just needs to bear out that they're a better team than the Washington Capitals, and if they get the goaltending, that'll help. But if they get the scoring too, which I think they have the potential to get, and they made some good pickups too. That Thomas Vanek trade, he's been traded like 17 times in the last 2 months, it seems, but that was a good pickup, and I think it really added to their scoring depth. I like the Blue Jackets of all the underseeded teams in the first round in the East. I think I like their chances best.
Thomas Vanek, 15 points in 19 games for the Blue Jackets. Nice pickup there. I don't dislike Columbus either. I think it really does come down to Bobrovsky. Like I said, I think they have a lot more depth than a team like New Jersey. And as far as now, there is like similar separation as far as their top point score to their next point score, which is why I'm making the comparison. But I think they have a lot more depth scoring, and the key difference there is also they have comparing Keith Kincaid to Sergei Bobrovsky is like comparing. I'm not even sure.
Like comparing my defensive ability to Brent Burns. Maybe not that. Right, it's not that big. It's not because Keith Kincaid is an NHL goalie.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, it's there. And also, I mean, their blue line on Columbus, that top pairing, who I'm sure Torts has no problem riding that top pairing, 25 minutes a night. He already does it pretty much in the regular season. I'm sure that'll bump up to closer to 30 during the playoffs.
Young legs, baby.
Young legs, let them ride, let them ride, let them ride. Moving on here, Marcus, the next team, and I think another circumstance of matchup certainly here as we go into it. That Boston-Toronto series is going to be fun. And so that means in the fifth, this would be our fifth spot, right? Yeah.
Yes.
We have the Toronto Maple Leafs sliding in there.
Yeah, I like this Maple Leafs team a lot. I think there are flaws. Their blue line isn't as deep necessarily as it could be. They still play Roman Polak a bit too much for my liking. But I love their forward depth. You know, they've got 3 legit lines. I think their top 9 can compete with anyone. You know, Patrick Marleau's 75 years old and he has another 45-point season. He's not actually 75. That would probably be the greatest athletic feat in human history if a 75-year-old scored 45 points in an NHL season. But it's just circumstances, man. No matter who they had played in the first round, whether Boston had beaten Florida on the last day of the season or Tampa Bay, or if whether Boston had or hadn't beaten them on the final Florida Panthers on the final day of the season, which got to get my dig in here. Not a dig, but my joke in here. In November, Dale Talon said that, you know, they cleaned up the front office in Florida by getting rid of the analytics guys, and that now that he was in charge, it was stable. Now they missed the playoffs by a point. So wonder if Jonathan March's show could have helped that team. I wonder.
Or Riley Smith.
I wonder.
Either guy.
Maybe that could have made the 1-point difference. But, you know, who am I to say? But it's circumstances. Whether they were playing Boston or Tampa, they would have had the hardest first-round matchup, I think, of any team, you know, outside of the bottom seeds playing the top seed. And even including that, because in any other, you know, in a 1-8 or 1-16 playoff format that disregards divisions, Tampa and Boston are the 1 and 2 seeds. Under any other circumstance, this should be a conference final, but we're going to get it in the second round. And, you know, frankly, if Toronto was in another division, I'd probably push them up higher. If they were in the Metro, they'd probably get to the conference final. I think
I agree.
They have a good chance. I think they're comparable to Pittsburgh at least. And I almost like their top defenseman more than I like Pittsburgh's. I think Morgan Riley's a better defenseman than outside of Letang is better than anybody on Pittsburgh's blue line. But it's circumstances. What has to happen for them to win the cup? Freddie Anderson probably needs to steal a series.
Yeah, especially against a Boston team, Marcus, that is essentially the best possession team in the playoffs. You know, which is funny. I'm looking at the possession numbers, and Marcus said, and our boys down in Carolina led the league this year. Imagine they had a goalie. Oh my God! Imagine they had a goalie, or if the Sedins had just gone. You know,
we had the solution. Tom Dundon, if you're listening.
Lundqvist and the Sedins to Carolina would have saved them.
And Tavares.
It's going to be tough for Boston. And Tavares, just put them all there. It's going to be tough. So it's going to be tough for Toronto facing Boston. Now, Toronto, of course, I think is a team in Marcus. They have so much goal scoring power on their top 6 that it's not. They don't necessarily have to have all the puck possession in the world because you know they're going to get their rushes and whatnot. I think a team like Boston, though, with the moves they made at the deadline, their top 4 on the blue line, and they're pretty much their top 9 forward group, even down to it, especially if you get a healthy Rick Nash playing third line right wing for you. Could just kind of wear down that Toronto blue line a bit. I think that's where you fall into it. But Toronto's got a fighter's chance for sure. I don't think you'd rule out Toronto in this series. I just think this is more circumstantial where we have them ranked in the standings rather than actual performance.
I think it's going to end in 7 the same way.
So do I. I got that going
5 years ago that it ended in 7. It won't be as heartbreaking. Arguably more heartbreaking because this Toronto team has a much better chance than that Toronto team had against Boston.
That Toronto team cost John Tortorella his job. That's the conspiracy I buy into. Because if Toronto won that series, I think that Ranger team would have run through Toronto because they were terrible. Right. Rangers made another conference final, and Tortorella probably wouldn't have been fired.
Yeah, that Toronto team is the worst team to make the playoffs since the Corsi era.
That was a pretty terrible team.
So yeah, move it. So I think Freddie Anderson steals the first series. They've got the game-breaking talent to make it possible. If you've got Austin Matthews, you're going to have more than a fighter's chance in any series.
Oh, for sure. And, and Toronto they got a bright future. It's nothing against them, really.
A beautiful city.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to Toronto in July. I'm going back.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Moving on, the 4th team. This This is where we get into the hot take segment of the prediction. I think the team with the fourth best chance to win the cup in the East is the Washington Capitals.
Yep, I would agree.
We talked a little bit earlier. Let's get into it. They are weak this year compared to previous years. Strangely, their blue line might be deeper than it's been in recent memory, especially at the bottom. They've got a few guys that they can plug into that third pairing. They made moves for. They acquired a pair of Czech defensemen whose names are escaping me at the moment. But they've got guys they can plug and play there depending upon matchups. John Carlson probably not as good as the stat line would indicate in terms of the 60 points. He's not necessarily drawing the toughest competition, and when he does draw tougher competition, he's not really driving play. Controversial move in net, starting Philip Grubauer, although you look at the advanced stats and, 5-on-5 at least, based on, expected goals and expected save percentage. Grubauer's been the better goalie in Washington, as surprising it is to say.
He has had a weak year, Marcus.
Yeah, and I like this move from Trotz to ride the hot hand. I think taking a page out of the Pittsburgh playbook and saying, you know what, we're going to play the guy who's better, and we're going to ride him as long as we can. As long as he doesn't get, maybe it's that Washington job that just inspires people to do this, but as long as he doesn't get Bruce Boudreau syndrome where he just pulls, like if they go down 0-1 and Grubauer stops 43 of 45 shots and he's like, we need a change, like just for change sake. I don't think he should have a quick trigger finger or a short leash necessarily, but he needs to maximize and ride out Grubauer as long as they can. And Grubauer's been really good. And part of the reason they're able to overcome being a not so great possession team is not only because they have, the best goal scorer of all time in Alexander Ovechkin, and Evgeny Kuznetsov is on the team as well, but Grubauer's been great. And in order for them to win a cup, and it's going to sound cliched, but I would argue more so than any other team, they're going to need goaltending to get them through the playoffs. Maybe not against New Jersey, but definitely against Pittsburgh, and then definitely against whichever juggernaut emerges from Boston, Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much all that, Marcus. I don't know if you remember my hot takes from last year. I said if Washington didn't win the Stanley Cup last year,
fold the franchise.
So I am pretty much never picking Washington again to do anything relevant. Weakest team they've probably had in. Gosh, I mean, you could make the argument flirting with like a 10-year range at this point. With when you think about all the Ovechkin Caps teams they've had and all these teams that have come so close and whatnot, they just have not been able to get over the hump. Not a great match. I really didn't think there was a really good matchup from them either way. Poor possession team, Marcus. Any which way you put it, whether it's score adjusted, regular 5-on-5, Corsi 4 per 60, they're under 20 each time you do it. They are not a strong possession team. They rely heavily as they on Ovechkin and Backstrom kind of carrying the load up there. And Kuznetsov has had a good year for them, well up front. And you have to be concerned about the goaltending. You have to be. As much as I think the good move is to put in Grubauer, he's not a proven commodity. And Braden Holtby clearly has the yips or something right now because it ain't working for him. Washington should be concerned. They're going to have as tough as a road as anybody facing Columbus, and then potentially, Pittsburgh in that next round, or even Philadelphia, who's given them troubles this year. Not easy. Washington, I think similar concept. I mean, we always talk about goaltending, but you're going to need 30 minutes out of John Carlson tonight, and you're going to need. I don't think he's that kind of defenseman. I like him. I think he's a good. Even if he's your second best guy, I like John Carlson. But as your top guy, I don't know if it's there for him.
I think on an ideal team, he's a second pairing guy.
Yeah, a second pairing guy, power play guy, could put up 50.
Maybe he gets a lot of ice time, but by second pairing, I mean like in terms of competition he faces, like in terms of difficult assignments, that kind of thing. So yeah, surprisingly just behind him in scoring, or not just behind him, 37 points behind him, but surprisingly with 31 points, at least I'm surprised to see Dmitry Orlov having a nice year for the Caps.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably their second best defenseman.
Turning into a decent little defenseman here.
Yeah, he's probably their second best there. I mean, he's up there with Niskanen, but I think they're going to have some trouble there. I think that's another series, Marcus, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, actually.
Washington and Columbus.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very good series.
The more we're doing this, and we'll briefly do predictions at the end, but the more we're doing this, the more I'm talking myself into picking against the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, so am I. So am I, actually, the more I'm thinking about it.
But we still think, even with and I think the big takeaway, and I think you're going to see a lot of takes on this moving forward, is that not all of the top possession teams are in the playoffs, but there's definitely been a demonstrated trend of the gaps between top and bottom possession teams kind of closing. And I think this is my theory, at least. I have no research to back it up, so I'm putting on my amateur scientist hat. I think the trend that we're maybe starting to see, and I think this is where the Caps kind of trust me, there's a point to what I'm saying, where the Caps are kind of breaking convention, is that as the gaps in possession close and as the league becomes more quote unquote parity driven, it really matters who your top guys are. And when your top guys are Washington's and you have Evgeny Kuznetsov, Nick Backstrom, and Alex Ovechkin riding the bus, and as those possession gaps, matter less and less, and the gaps close, the top end talent is going to win out. And I think that's
I think, Marcus, you led to something I've been talking about recently with some people. I think star power is becoming more and more prevalent in the NHL.
I agree.
You need 2 or 3 absolute studs to win. Yeah. And, whether you look at Pittsburgh with, Ryden, Malkin, and Crosby, and then Kessel right there with them.
Look at every team that's won the Cup since the lockout, except maybe the Carolina Hurricanes. Look at every team that's won the Cup since then. The Ducks, 2 Hall of Famers on the blue line. The 07-08 Red Wings might be the best team in the puck possession era.
Yeah.
The 09-10 Blackhawks aren't far behind. The Penguins, Crosby and Malkin. I think you're onto something.
I think star power is more and more coming into prevalence. And you still obviously need depth, but at the end of the day, if your depth, let's say everything is even at the end of the day, talent's going to win in a long run.
And a lot of these teams are even at the bottom of their rosters now.
We are seeing, and I think the Penguins have trendsetted it. I think the Blackhawks even go further back. We see it. Even the Penguins this year, they traded for Ryan Reeves last year, Marcus. And then they realized, you know what? This was stupid. We do not need to do this. And they get rid of him. And they bring in a guy like Derek Brassard. Imagine that upgrade on the roster. Hey, would you want Ryan Reeves playing 8 minutes a night on your fourth line right wing? Or do you want a former 60-point guy who can still score 45 points on their third line center?
Right.
You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Working your way.
I think that's a longer discussion for a later time.
Yeah.
And potentially a blog post here and there.
That's right. And Marcus is getting the ideas right now.
I've talked myself into. So moving on, we think the team with the third best chances, and you just mentioned them as trend setting. The Pittsburgh Penguins, the Walking Dead of the National Hockey League. They just will not die.
Oh my gosh, I am so sick of the Penguins. Please lose. Please lose. But no, the Penguins are a great team, Marcus. You talked about Matt Murray. It's amazing, these 2 runs they've had, and their goaltending has always been kind of in question, hasn't it?
Right.
Murray's gotten hot here and there. Their depth up front, though, Marcus, top to bottom, it's up there for, I think you could really kind of flip and flop as far as forward depth of these top 3 teams are about to list in the East. I think you have to do that. I think their weak point, as it has been, though, in the past 2 years, Marcus, is their blue line. We keep saying it, and for some reason they're getting past it.
Eventually we're going to be right.
Eventually. Eventually is the key word there. I think it goes into the credit, though, with Pittsburgh, Marcus, is even though they are not the best, don't have the best blue line, there's a common theme with all these blue lines they've had the past couple seasons, and they can skate. And they can move. They aren't the best defensemen in the league, but the very least they could skate and be involved in the play. I think about guys like Trevor Daley, who's moved on, and players like Justin Schultz, who's had a good time there.
Another player that Pete Chiarelli's traded that's playing in the playoffs.
Probably, outside of Letang, they don't really have a true second guy. Pretty much it's like, basically you have a number one in Letang who's been injured sometimes.
And then like 5 number 4s.
And exactly. But because of the talent they have up front, it's worked. And I think they'd be able to pull out through because of that. For them to win the cup, Marcus, I mean, pick your poison. Whoever's got to be the stud, whether it's Malkin or Crosby. Their depth scoring has been fantastic there, obviously. 3 guys, Marcus, 3 players. Malkin with 98 points, Kessel with 92, Crosby with 89. So 3 players there flirt with that 90-point range. And today's NHL is something else.
And the crazy thing, too, is for the most part, and, you can speak to this more, being out there and watching them, those guys play on 3 separate lines.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For the most part, I mean, outside of the power play, they aren't usually together. I mean,
and that's where I think this kind of next frontier of teams that we're seeing is having star power on your team. And Sullivan just had the brilliant idea to say, oh, well, what if I spread the wealth? I think that's kind of this next frontier of team building in the NHL, is having that top end star power, but being able to disperse it throughout your lineup. If you have Phil Kessel, Evgeny Malkin, and Sidney Crosby on your top 3 lines on 3 separate lines,
I mean, Marcus, if you think about it, 2 are absolute locks for the Hall of Fame right now. And Phil Kessel, on the trend he's going with, is going to have a shot. Yeah. And you're literally playing them on 3. You have 2 absolute Hall of Famers, another one who's going to be flirting with it on the 3rd line. I mean, sometimes, and it goes back to it, Marcus. We think about, it makes me think about Philadelphia, and they had that top line, but outside of that, it really falls off. Right. They have that top line whose possession numbers are like flirting with 60. It's stupid how good they are. And they're Corsi 4, excuse me, is flirting with 60. But at the end of the day, after that, they're not going to be out there for 25, 30 minutes a night. Right. So this is a team that will wear you down. They've done it before. I mean, Marcus, is it an overplayed narrative to say that they could be tired, or is it just at this point I
think they're past it. I think there is something to be said, and I think you've seen those hangups in the regular season, both in hockey and in basketball. I mean, you look at the Warriors, and you add up the amount of playoff games they've played over the last 4 years, and it basically adds up to an extra season of games, and that's why they're so they've appeared worn down this year. And I think you saw that with the Penguins to start the year, even with the longer summer, those do add up, but I think Sullivan's done a good job of getting through that initial hangover, so to speak. And then once the playoffs happen, I think, it's going to be, it might help them that they have that experience of how to manage their bodies and how to rest properly down the stretch. When some of these teams, and the team we talk about, I think is our favorite, has a player who's literally going to the press and saying, well, I'm tired.
It's never a good thing when your backbone of your team tells you you're tired. Yeah,
so, we like the Pens, but we don't like them as much as the top 2 teams.
No, absolutely. I think the Pens have as good a chance as anybody to make the finals. It's not even what do they need to happen. It's pretty much just as long as some other things don't happen. As long as basically as long as they avoid injuries, they have as good of a chance as anybody, as far as I'm concerned. And they get 9, 17, 18 goaltending from Matt Murray.
Or Casey DeSmith, or the other guy from NHL 18 creative player that they put in net.
Yeah, whoever it is. They're going to bring in Scott Foster from Chicago to play.
And it'll help if one of these next 2 teams is beat up. So let's move. You and I both agree. We think the de facto conference final is going to be the second round series between what we think will be Boston and Tampa Bay. Although I would make the argument that if Toronto gets there, that's arguably a de facto conference final as well.
Yeah.
But I think you and I agree, we both have Boston as the second best team, mostly because of our own disbelief that they're here in the first place.
It's incredible. What a turnaround the Boston Bruins have been over the past couple of years. They've just kind of been this middling team. And I think it goes to show you, Marcus, to me, is the strength of building from within, really. When you think about guys like Charlie McAvoy and Danton Heinen and all these guys, and then,
all these guys who have names that seem to have been made to be pronounced by Boston accents.
Danton Heinen.
Charlie McAvoy. Ryan Donato.
David Pasternak. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at this team, Marcus, the first thing that jumps out to me is depth, and more depth. They have a solid lineup. They have a goaltender who always kind of gets ripped on a little bit more than maybe he should. But, Tuukka Rask has been solid this year, 917, so slightly above average goaltender so far this year. We've seen him turn things on in the playoffs for sure. Have a lot of depth. I mean, as long as Brian Giunta doesn't play that much. I sometimes I forget Brian. It's like, as every team has their issues, right? You're like, wow, Boston, what a great trade deadline they had. They added all this depth. They did this, and they're like,
and they also signed
Brian Giunta. That's great.
Yeah.
When you could be playing someone who could have an impact on your future, but
not even the best player that's on Boston that was on the Olympic team.
No, you're right. You're right. Oh my God, I wasn't even thinking about. When you think, Ryan Donato, who's had 9 points in 12 games. I mean, pretty incredible stuff. Depth, Marcus. I mean, Boston wins the cup because of their depth. That's how they will win the Stanley Cup. We talk about how star power takes over. That's probably your issue with Boston. I mean, they have that top line, right? Pastrnak, Marchand, and Bergeron. And then after that, I think there's a bit of a drop-off. But still a really deep team. There's really no weak points.
And that's a good second line. Krejci, DeBrusk, and Rick Nash.
Yeah, I don't know if Rick Nash's health is still in question. I'm not sure if he's even going to be playing the first couple of games. We'll see what happens.
I'm looking at Daily Faceoff. They have these line combinations updated as of today. So as of our recording, Rick Nash slotted into that second line winger, but Donato is not in the lineup according to this, which that's
what a disaster.
I mean, if you could play the guy who scored 0 points in the Olympic tournament as opposed to the guy who scored 10 more than that, you have to do it.
You have to do it. I mean, it's just logic, right? It's logic.
Yeah. But yeah, I think their depth and, surprisingly, I think they've really managed to, make the most out of losing a pretty good defenseman in Colin Miller in the expansion draft to Vegas.
Yeah.
And Zdeno Chara and Charlie McAvoy are the ultimate odd couple of NHL defensive pairings and have been one of the better defensive pairings in the league.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Zdeno Chara and Charlie McAvoy, to pronounce it properly.
Get it right, Marcus.
So I like their team. I just, for whatever reason, I'm still not quite sold on them. And I think Tuukka does get a little too much criticism, but he's had some up and down years here lately, but he's been a lot better this year. I think they're good, and I think they're deep. I just don't think they're as good or as deep as the team that I have coming out of the Eastern Conference.
And it comes up, Marcus, comes back to star power again. And I don't know if anybody has more star power in the league right now than, or at least in the Eastern Conference, than our number one team, who we both believe has the best chance to come out of the Eastern Conference and participate in the Stanley Cup Finals. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I did you have them going to the finals too in the beginning of the year? I think we both did.
Sounds right. I can't remember, but it sounds right.
I'm pretty sure we did. You guys could fact check us and then fight.
We'll fact check ourselves too.
Yeah, we'll fact check ourselves. Tampa Bay. I mean, not only do they have depth, Marcus, they have just elite scoring talent up and down the lineup. Obviously, Kucherov, right up there as one of the best players and most pure talents in the league, 100 points. Stamkos, Braden Point, Yanni Gord. I mean, they have 5 guys north of 60 points. They have 10 guys north of 40 points.
And of those guys that are in it, like how many of them were late round draft picks, including JT Miller? Like JT Miller, top line left wing, who they didn't draft, but 5th rounder, right?
Kucherov. No, JT Miller was a first round pick, actually.
Yeah, never mind. There goes my narrative. But Andre Palat, Tyler Johnson, and Yanni Gord sure as hell were not drafted early.
No, they were not. Alex Killorn later, Tyler Johnson. But, I mean, their blue line, Marcus, you look at it this way, Marcus, depth down the middle, depth on the blue line, yes, and their goaltending is fantastic, right? You look at that. Steven Stamkos, Braden Point, Yanni Gord, right up the middle, and Tyler Johnson, all could be on this. All can be up the middle. JT Miller could be on the center too, although he's been playing the wing. And then you look at their blue line. I mean, Victor Hedman, Anton Strawman, maybe the best defensive pairing over the last, 3 or 4 years here when you think about it in the league. And then you just go down with their depth, realistically. I mean, Miguel Sergachev has been just absolutely astonishing. I mean, as a 19-year-old in the NHL on the blue line, putting up, 40 points in 79 games. He's been absolutely incredible. So, I mean, when you think about that top three now, you always, and then obviously Ryan McDonough, of course, making that foursome right there makes it probably the best top four, flirting with Nashville in the league right now. Although you always get nervous if they're going to be playing Dan Girardi, then you're not sure.
Right. And I think that's the key for me for Tampa for them to get to the final is
not playing Dan Girardi.
I'm not going to go that far, but if Dan Girardi doesn't embarrass himself, and more importantly, if Andrei Vasilevsky doesn't collapse under his regular season workload, because they've got the pieces everywhere else, but you squint closely enough, there's something still amiss. And playing Dan Girardi as a top four defenseman, right now he's listed as playing with Victor Hedman. At least Ryan McDonough finally got away from Dan Girardi. He's playing with Anton Strawman. Much like that 2013-14 Ranger team, there's still, you squint closely enough, it's kind of a similar issue, right? Maybe a little more talented than the 2013-14 Ranger team.
Definitely more talented.
But the same issue of, will the goalie collapse from his regular season workload and carrying the team? Yeah. And will Dan Girardi embarrass himself? And I don't not just pick on Girardi, but he's clearly miscast in that role. That being said, their U.S. Olympian is on the fourth line, and Ryan Callahan. Boston's U.S. Olympians that aren't named Ryan Donato are on the third line with David Backes and Brian Giunta. I think that speaks to the forward depth that Tampa Bay has, and the relative forward depth that the Boston Bruins have. So yeah, I like Tampa coming out of the East. It's chalk, but I feel really good about that pick.
It is, Marcus. I agree. All right. So briefly, once again, folks, we'll do the Western Conference tomorrow before the matchups start here. Going through, Marcus, real quick, we went through our 8 through 1 as far as realistically who we thought the best chances to win. So let's go really quick, series by series. We'll go through it and go through our picks. We'll just start. I'm looking at the brackets right now. So we'll start at the top. First round, Tampa, New Jersey. I got Tampa. I'll give Jersey a game. Tampa in 5. Yeah. It's hard to pick a sweep, but
very hard.
So I'll give Jersey a game. I got Tampa in 5. What about you?
Tampa 5.
Boston, Toronto. Boston 7. Yeah. Boston wins it on home ice in 7. Want to go down through the first round? You want to work our way through the top half of the bracket?
Sure, let's go through the whole first round.
Yeah, Washington, Columbus.
I'm going Blue Jackets in 7.
Yeah, this is a series where I was thinking Washington, but you know what? I'm sticking to my guns about what I said last year and how Washington, frankly, shouldn't exist anymore. So I'm taking the Blue Jackets. I'm going to take the Blue Jackets in 6. They're going to win it on home ice.
How about that? Fire off the cannons.
That's right. Fire the cannons. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Oh, I hope there's just no defense in this series.
Penguins in 6.
Penguins in 5.
Okay.
Penguins in 6. I think Philly will steal, just because of the nature of that rivalry, Philly will steal some games. Penguins in 6. Going to top, Tampa, Boston should be in the conference final. Unfortunately, it's going to be in the second round, Marcus. Can argue both teams, but I've had Tampa all year. I'm going to take a 7. That's going to be a 7-round series as well, I think.
Yeah, Tampa 7.
Tampa in 7. That means we have a one-sided rivalry to an extent.
Oh, very one-sided. Yeah.
Columbus kind of thinks Pittsburgh's a rival, and I don't think Pittsburgh really takes them that seriously quite yet. No. They did match up in the 2013-14 playoffs. That was a fun little series there. Pittsburgh and Columbus, Marcus. I'm going to take the Penguins in 6 games in that one.
Yeah, so am I. Penguins.
So I know, we are so boring. We have Tampa and Pittsburgh. Marcus, does Pittsburgh make it back to a 3rd straight Stanley Cup?
No, Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games.
Tampa Bay in 6 games. I'm going to take Tampa. I'm going to take Tampa in 7. I think Pittsburgh gives them a run for their money, just because Crosby will put on a show or something to keep them alive. But
he'll score another baseball goal.
That, oh my God. What is that
It's
guy?
a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. He's just so much better than everyone else. It's a joke.
It's almost embarrassing. It really is. Banking it off goalies' backs, banking it out of the air. So there it is, Marcus. The Eastern Conference, though. The Tampa Bay Lightning to represent the Eastern Conference. Who will they play in the West? Come back
to be determined tomorrow.
That's right. You're going to have to find out tomorrow. We're going to split this series up here. Anything else? Any Marcus, real quick, a hot take for the Eastern Conference playoffs, real quick. Anything hot? Anything or a bold prediction maybe is a better way to
bold prediction. Tyler Johnson leads the Lightning in scoring.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm going to say Evgeny Malkin leads the Eastern Conference in points, but they don't make the Stanley Cup playoff.
Okay, I like it. Bolder prediction. Actually, not even bolder prediction. Just last one, real quick. Over under on Dan Girardi goals set at a half.
At a half?
Half.
I mean, I'm going to say over because he's going to it'll be a fluke.
He'll get an empty netter.
I mean, yeah, he's going to block a shot and it'll bank off the boards and go down the end of the ice and go in.
Yeah.
He finds a way somehow.
I'm going to take the over, but just barely as well. And on that note, that'll wrap up our Eastern Conference playoff preview. Thanks as always for watching. And we'll be back tomorrow to preview the West. Until then, for Conall, I'm Marcus. Have a good one.